Hi, this is Alessio, Rastani, leading trader. Hope you're well, and welcome to this update on Bitcoin. In this video, I'm going to show you something very interesting and actually incredibly fascinating. I'm going to explain to you exactly what this particular signal you see here on my chart could potentially mean. This is the first time I've seen this signal for a number of months. I'm going to explain to you exactly what this means. In fact, I'll show you what it meant the last time, in fact, in previous times when this signal occurred on the charts. And also something quite interesting as I'm making this video is the fact that Bitcoin has seen a nice bounce. In fact, as you may remember in my last video when I said the Bitcoin has hit a very important level here at this point, it's going to potentially see a bounce. And in fact, we're seeing that happening right now as I'm speaking. And I'll explain to you what that could mean in this video as well. All right, guys, now before I start this video and talk about Bitcoin, I do have something important to get out of the way first. And this has been on my chest now for the last few days. I really want to talk about it because if I don't talk about it, I am probably going to explode. So I hope you'll allow me just a couple of minutes to quickly explain this important point. In my previous video, I showed a quick clip of Professor Aslan, who is a historian, and he was explaining about how historians view history and religion in their eyes. And the reason I showed this clip is because that is precisely what many traders do. Many traders and analysts, professional analysts and traders, look at the markets like a historian because we want to differentiate between what is possible and what is likely. Now, here's what happened. After I posted my video, I received some great feedback and comments, but I also received a bunch of very ignorant and hateful comments from some people who probably should know better, and I'm not going to read out their comments because they're just disgusting and hateful. So I'm going to speak now to those ignorant, uneducated, and hateful people who posted those nasty comments, and I hope you're listening, and I know you are. So firstly, get your facts straight. You're saying that Professor Aslan is attacking Christianity? Let me say this to you. Professor Aslan was an evangelical Christian before he became a historian. In fact, his wife is a Christian, and he converted his own mother to Christianity. Secondly, his audience members, the people who were sitting there listening to him in this lecture room, they were all predominantly Christians. Thirdly, Professor Aslan has always said in his lectures, if you listen to them, how much deep love and affection and admiration he has for Jesus and also for Christianity, as do I. I have always admired and respected the moral teachings of Jesus. That goes without saying. Number 4, and I'm speaking again to those ignorant, uneducated people who posted those nasty and hateful comments. You call yourself a Christian and then you post nasty comments about someone else's character? Let me say something to you. I'm going to do something in this video, which I know you cannot do. And again, I'm speaking to those ignorant people out there who posted those comments. I'm going to forgive you and I'm going to love you because that is what Jesus taught us. Not to hate, not to be intolerant, not to say nasty things, not to say lies and nasty things, but instead to love one another, to forgive one another, and to show compassion, benevolence, and to love one's enemy and love one's neighbor. That is what Jesus taught us. All right, guys, let's continue. And again, I apologize about that rant. I didn't want to do it, but I had to get it off my chest. I'm just sick and tired of people who call themselves Christian, and at the same time, their actions speak full of hatred. All right? That is not what Christianity or what Jesus taught us. Jesus says in the book of Matthew that words are not enough. You have to act moral. You have to act like a Christian. All right, guys, let's take a look at this chart of Bitcoin. Now, as you probably remember in my last video, I said, look, Bitcoin has hit a key level, and I explained what that key level was. It was the 61.8% Fibonacci retracement. In fact, if I just show you right here one more time, there it is. So you can see, if you just do a quick Fibonacci retracement, you'll see that it hit the 61.8% retrace level, held it, and it's now bouncing from that level, as you can see right there. Now, I should just say I'm making this video on a Sunday, and as you probably know by now, as I've said it before, weekend activity is not usually reliable because a lot of this activity is driven usually by bots and algorithms. So we do need to wait and see how markets play out from the Monday-Friday session, as that tends to be much more reliable. Now, let's take a look at this chart of Bitcoin here on this chart, and you're probably wondering, what is this massive cluster, this red cluster you see here? Okay, this is a specific indicator that I created some time ago now, last year, and it's called the LT Time Power Projection Indicator. Sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but let me explain to you what it is. You see, most traders, and in fact most analysts, look at only one thing, which is the price axis. So that's the price axis on the right-hand side, all right? But most people actually ignore the axis at the bottom, which is the time axis. So let me just quickly show you what I mean. The time axis is equally as important, and perhaps even more important, important than the price axis. So we like to combine both price and time together. Now, why is that important? Because price only gives us resistance and support on the price axis. In other words, the floor and the ceiling on the charts. But time resistance acts like a wall. Okay, it acts like a wall on the price. And that is what I'm interested in. I want to see how does time resistance act on price as well. All right, guys, so that's what we're going to talk about here. And in case you're wondering, the theory behind this actually was put forward by a fantastic trader. Her name is Carolyn Borden. And she said this. She said, when we see trading parameters on both the time and price axis come together at the same time, we are looking at our highest probability, lowest risk trade setups in the marketplace. All right, guys, so what Carolyn's saying there is that we should not just be looking at the price axis, but both time and price to increase our probability, increase our odds and edge. And just before I show you the examples, let me just explain that time resistance is non-directional. Okay, so it doesn't actually show you which direction the market could go. However, you can use it to give you a sense of direction. You could do that. But essentially what time resistance is telling you is three things. When inflection points are about to occur, when big moves are likely to occur, and also when a market move is likely to pause or stall. All right, let me give you one example here. For example, this is when gold was in that massive bubble that we had some years ago. Notice as it went higher and higher, we actually had an idea. We had a leading indication of when that bubble could potentially burst. As you can see here from our massive spike here on the LT time power projection indicator, right there, as you can see, that came indeed at the very top on the gold market before it reversed. It actually reversed direction and crashed from that point. And here's one here on Bitcoin. Now this is Bitcoin back in July of last year. Notice that as Bitcoin was dropping here, we knew in advance, in fact, this is a leading indicator. So we knew about this in advance of it happening. We knew exactly which date or between what date ranges the price of Bitcoin could potentially reverse direction. As you can see right there, there was our LT time power projection right there, as you can see, and then boom, the price then reversed direction. Okay, now remember, just like everything else, there's no guarantee or there's no certainty that price will reverse when we see that time power projection. But again, it does increase our probability when you combine it with the price. Here's another example for you here. So, and here's another one for you right over here. In September of that same year, last year, we had another time power projection, which came very close indeed to this very significant low that we had here on Bitcoin. Again, sometimes the parameters of the date ranges can be off by about a week or so. Let me show you this. This is Bitcoin back. Take a look at this. You'll see right down here a cluster, the clustering effect. And by the way, that is exactly what creates this red power projection. When you see a clustering effect of time relationships coming together, that is what produces the time power, the red time power projection. And notice that happened just a few weeks, about a couple of weeks before this major top formed in Bitcoin. And what do we see here? We're seeing that right now we're having the same thing. We're seeing, in fact, let me just zoom back a bit here. Notice that right now we seem to be approaching another time power projection. And I'll show you exactly what time range that is, as you will see here. So let me just explain one of the ways I use this indicator, which is, first of all, I look at the previous trend of the price. The previous trend in the short term certainly has been to the downside. As you can see, here is the downward trend right now we're having. And you can see it's approaching this cluster of time relationships. Again, what we're seeing here is this time power projection, this red clustering effect here. And that's giving us a time range between, let me see if I can get my crosshairs here. Okay, so you can see it's between the 14th of July, and which is essentially what we are right now, and the 21st of July. Yeah, so essentially we have a time range from today all the way to the 21st, 22nd of July. And by the way, that gives us a peak. There's also a peak here. The peak seems to be about the middle of next week, or this week coming, essentially. So the peak is about the 17th to the 19th of July. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what is this blue rectangular formation, this vertical blue area here? I'll explain to you that as well. If I go in a lower time frame, a 4-hour chart, I'll show you exactly what we're seeing here on this chart. Now, take a look at this. On the right-hand side of my chart, right there, you will see that there's a deep clustering effect which produces a red power projection. Okay, and I'm more interested in the red power projections as opposed to the other ones. The other ones actually are there just to give me some guidance, but it's when those clustering effects come together to form a red power projection that is what's important. That gives me a date range, just to give you an idea of where that is. That gives me a date range between the 25th to the 27th of July. So something potentially big could be happening in that date range between the 25th and 27th of July. Now, we don't know what exactly is going to happen in those date ranges, but I think we can have a pretty good clue that either it's going to be a major reversal or potentially a big move, or both. Okay, so usually what happens when we approach these time resistance levels, like the one here, and as shown to you by this rectangular formation, by this blue area here. So when we approach these time resistance, again, it acts like a wall. It acts like a wall of resistance on time. And when you combine that with the price, it becomes certainly much more powerful. So guys, what that means is this: keep those date ranges in mind. Between the 15th, again, essentially that's from today, all the way to the 22nd of July, which is essentially the week that we're going into. All right. And also keep in mind the date range I just mentioned a few moments ago, which is between the 25th and 27th of July. All right, guys, something potentially big could be happening there. Again, as I mentioned, these indicators are non-directional, but you can certainly use them to find some kind of direction. Well, we know, for example, that we are at a major support level. We know that, for example, we are at the February-April lows, okay? These significant lows near the 6,000 level, okay? And guess what? And we're approaching time resistance. So now we have got two important levels: price support and resistance, and also time resistance. Two key levels coming together, which means, guys, in my view, if Bitcoin is going to reverse direction, if it's going to show any kind of reversal or inflection point, it's potentially going to be between this date range, as I mentioned before, between the 15th and the 22nd of July. And if it doesn't happen, then we're looking at this date range here between 25th and the 27th of July. This looks very interesting for Bitcoin. And again, as I mentioned before, as I'm making this video right now, Bitcoin is seeing a very nice bounce. So all I'm going to say to Bitcoin right now is Godspeed. Let's see what happens here. I certainly hope that the momentum here continues and pushes this higher. And by the way, as I mentioned in the previous video, what needs to also happen is we need to maintain and keep the sanctity of this previous low that we formed here near just above the 6,000 level. So we need to remain above last Friday's lows. And guys, before I finish this video, I just want to say this very quickly. I know that you, the majority of my subscribers, are fantastic, very sophisticated, intelligent people. So I really appreciate the fact that you watch my videos. Thank you very much indeed. But just for the benefit of those people who posted those nasty comments below my video, those very uneducated, ignorant people who said those nasty things on my previous video, I want to play this clip, very short clip, if you don't mind, of Professor Aslan expressing his devotion, his admiration and affection for Jesus. Thank you very much.
So I'd always been deeply interested about religion and spirituality, but never really had any opportunity to express that. When I was in high school, I went to an evangelical youth camp, and there I heard the gospel story for the first time. This incredible story about the God of the heavens and earth coming down to the earth in the form of a baby, in the form of a child, growing up, dying for the sins of humanity, and this notion that we who believe in him can also have eternal life. It was the most amazing story I'd ever heard in my entire life. I immediately gave my life to Jesus, had a deep encounter with Christ. Spent the next 4 or 5 years preaching the gospel as I had learned it from this very conservative evangelical community, preaching it to everyone, whether they wanted to hear it or not, frankly. Even ended up converting my mother, who is still a Christian to this day. And I guess the only way that I can put it is that I became more interested, more drawn to the historical Jesus. He seemed so much more real to me, so much more approachable and accessible to me. I'm glad of the experience that I had. I'm glad that I was able to know Jesus both as a worshiper and as a scholar, because it allowed me, on the one hand, to understand the power of faith and to have a deep, deep abiding respect for the faith of Christianity and what this man has meant to billions of people around the world.